I stood alone, wrapped in my burgundy robe and straightening my slightly askew cap, feeling the wind blowing between the ancient brick buildings of the campus trying to tear my already fragile solemn mood to shreds, while scenes of joyful reunions unfolded around me, as if according to a script. Ringing hugs, gushing laughter, tears, emotion and endless camera flashes, capturing moments that will forever remain in family albums, but not in mine. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. My name is Bianca, and today I graduated from college with a bachelor's degree in computer science, the very degree for which I spent sleepless nights in the library, immersing myself in abstract algorithms, parsing someone else's code like an archaeologist unearthing long-forgotten truths, and proving to myself that I was worth something, even if no one else sees it but me. My parents weren't at the ceremony. They were far away, in another city, where my twin sister Emily's graduation was celebrated on the same day. I looked at my phone screen again, reading their message for probably the 10th time that morning. "We are so proud of Emily's graduation. We can't wait for you to come home to celebrate together." Not a word about my diploma, not a single line of congratulations, not the slightest hint that this day means to me either, just another reminder that, despite the common birthday, I was always second, like an invisible shadow in its shining light. When I boarded the train and found a seat by the window, next to which no one was sitting, I allowed myself to lose myself in my thoughts, watching as the familiar silhouette of the campus, the library tower, curved bridges, flooded with light squares, slowly disappears outside the window, dissolving into the green haze of the spring forest, like a piece of my life torn off and carried away, to a place where he was never destined to return. I knew it wasn't worth waiting for anything. It's always been like this. Emily and I were born on the same day, but that's where our similarities ended, and every year just emphasized how different we are. Emily was the living embodiment of charisma, with her ringing laugh, open smile, blonde hair inherited from her mother, and sparkling blue eyes, in which our dad saw his youth. I, on the other hand, was reserved, prone to reflection and silence, with dark brown hair and brown eyes that reflected none of them both, and maybe that's why I so often felt like I was accidentally not in my family. Sometimes, on particularly dreary evenings, I thought that maybe I had been replaced at the hospital, but the old childhood photos carefully pasted into the album left no doubt. We really were twins, just not the same. And every birthday only reinforced this disparity. "Happy birthday, Emily," was always written on the cake, as if the holiday was just hers, and I was just a member of the crowd. When I finally found the courage to ask my mom why, she waved me off with a laugh. "Oh, dear, we all know that today is your birthday too. Is it necessary to write this? The pastry shop just makes a template." But strangely, the template turned out to be Emily's name every time. Through the glass of the carriage, I remembered our 16th birthday, how Emily was handed the keys to a small but cute used car, and I was handed a box with a laptop. To be honest, it was a good laptop, and I was really happy at the time, until I accidentally overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. They took the computer at a discount, but it was enough to invest a little more in Emily's car. That's right. Those words rang in my ears for a long time. However, it was that laptop that I brought to the school programming club, the only place where it seemed to me that I really belonged. There, among soldering irons, lines of code, and stuck keys, I met Mr. Ferry, our supervisor, the man who first looked at me not as an addition to Emily, but as a person. "Bianca, you have a gift," he said one day, when I dismantled someone else's project in a matter of minutes, in which no one could find a mistake. "You think differently. It's a value." The train rocked, bringing me back to reality, and I closed my eyes, holding in my head that voice, its sincerity, that moment when I first believed that I had a future. It was on this laptop that I compiled my portfolio for admission, spending hours polishing every project, rechecking every line, and when one evening at dinner my father said, "We need to talk about college. We've saved everything we could, but there's only enough money for one of you," I already knew what I was going to say. "I don't need anything," I replied calmly. "I enrolled on a full scholarship. I don't need your money." The shock on their faces was almost sweet. "Have you applied to the Institute of Technology?" Mom asked. "When?" I remember proudly replying that Mr. Ferry had helped me collect all the materials, to which my father frowned and asked, "Who is Mr. Ferry?" My programming teacher. "It's been 3 years now." They looked at each other, and in that moment I realized that they really didn't know anything about me. The announcement in the carriage interrupted my memories. 2 more hours before arrival, and I went home, which I had never felt at home. After all, the Institute has long been my real home, the place where I was seen. It was at the Institute of Technology, in these clean and minimalistic walls smelling of plastic, coffee, and slightly overheated processors, where every corner seemed to be saturated with an inexpressible excitement of discovery, that I first met Alex. It happened in the early days of orientation, when a crowd of freshmen, with sparkling eyes and uncertain steps, filled the classroom, interrupted the teachers, and she hung on every word greedily, as if the future itself depended on it, and in the midst of this chaos, among hundreds of faces, scared and ecstatic at the same time, I noticed him right away, tall, with his hair always disheveled, as if he had just got up from the keyboard, and with the same kind of lost, but obsessed expression in his eyes. We both felt awkward, and we both tried to hide it behind awkward humor and sudden technical chatter that confused others, but instantly brought us closer together, us two students who were obsessed with coding until the world around us ceased to exist, and each of us had ideas that seemed to come out far beyond our abilities, as if our mind was always one step ahead of our skills, but this only fueled our ambitions and forced us not to stop. By the second year, it became obvious that free time meant only one thing to us: hours spent side by side in the shadow of laboratory light, discussing, arguing, building, redesigning, debugging every line of our common brainchild, the file-sharing application, which, as Alex said with such a twinkle in his eyes, as if it has already changed the world, it can become something more. Bianca, I feel it. Sometimes we worked until 3 in the morning, forgetting about sleep, about food, about anything except logic and code, and even though I tried to temper his hopes by reminding myself not to expect too much, a part of me believed anyway, because it was only on those nights that I felt that something in me is finally valuable. Meanwhile, my rare calls home turned into boilerplate dialogues that could be recorded and simply played back. "Hello, dear, how are you?" You know, Emily had just been elected to the student council, and then there was a constant list of her achievements, right up to when Emily went to the dean's party, and every time Mom suddenly remembered that I was on the other end of the phone, too, and asked what I was doing, I tried to explain. Alex and I are developing a file-sharing platform that, but before I could finish, my mom's voice jumped to Emily's neighbor, the Johnsons, and the Aspen country house, where she was invited. Of course. When I came home for the winter holidays, everything went according to the same scenario. Emily arranged a salon in the living room, where her parents, beaming with pride, talked about her capabilities, shared stories about people with big names whom she knew, and I sat in a corner, sometimes nodding when someone threw at me a polite mention on my part, like, "And Bianca is also studying programming, right?" But everything changed overnight when, after countless sleepless nights, long debates, and failed tests, Alex and I finally perfected our app, so much so that it caught the attention of a tech company from California, one of those whose names sounded like incantations in the startup world. After months of negotiations, consultations with lawyers, editing the terms, endless calls and Zooms, we sold the project, for an amount that seemed not just unrealistic, but almost absurd, $2 million each after taxes. I sat in my dorm room for 2 weeks after the deal was closed, staring at the phone screen, on which the numbers in the banking application did not change no matter how much I checked. $2 million, and it was all mine, at the age of 21. I didn't tell anyone, not my parents, not my roommate, not the few friends I had, because over the years, when my successes were invisible, when my projects were just a background noise for Emily's victories, I stopped feeling that they deserved to know, because if they've never been interested in what I do, why share it with them now? Besides, I didn't know how they would react. What if they start caring? What if they pretend to love me just because I'm now valuable in monetary terms? I didn't want to know. So I continued to live like an ordinary student. I ate instant noodles, complained about the price of textbooks, and wore old clothes until they literally began to fall apart at the seams, and no one suspected that the quiet girl in the corner of the computer lab was a millionaire. And so, a year later, I was on the train again, on a holiday that wasn't meant for me. I watched as my parents enthusiastically celebrated Emily's successes, as they talked about her, as if she was their only child and I was some kind of shadow in the corner. I smiled, pretending that I wasn't in pain, as always. The train slowed down, and I felt my breathing get a little heavier as the station of my hometown loomed in the window. I gathered my things, took a deep breath, as if I were donning invisible armor, and stepped into a world that only knew me as a second. I pushed open the front door of my childhood home, and the sounds of laughter, lively conversations, music, and the clink of glasses all poured out at me from the living room. Colorful banners and a huge Emily graduate congratulatory banner were everywhere, sparkling with gloss and gold letters. It was all for her, of course. "Hi," I called out, dropping my bag in the hallway. Mom looked at me briefly, as if my appearance was not an event, but something like moving furniture, noticeable but not worthy of special attention, while continuing to lay out sandwiches on a tray, carefully decorated with leaves of greenery. "Oh, Bianca, you're here," she said, without even looking up. "The guests will arrive any minute. Will you help arrange the napkins?" No hugs, not like you, not even a cursory glance that would say that I was more than just a temporary assistant at a celebration in honor of another daughter. "How was your trip?" she said casually, as if just filling in the void in the conversation, not expecting or wanting an answer, because she immediately switched to the to-do list for Emily's upcoming party. I nodded silently and busied myself with the napkins, carefully laying them out on the table, pretending that it was important, that I wanted to be a part of it, while somewhere in the depths of me a feeling of detachment grew, as if I were a guest in my own house again. The doorbell rang, and an endless stream of guests began, relatives, neighbors, acquaintances, family friends, each of whom carried gifts, packages, and postcards decorated with sequins and pompous inscriptions. "Congratulations, Emily." I was standing in the corner, trying my best to put a polite smile on my face, when someone asked who I was, and Mom hurriedly added, "This is Bianca, Emily's sister. She also just graduated from college." But the essence of the evening, and then the speech was carried away again, like a stream of water on an inclined surface. "Isn't that amazing? Emily is completing the business program with honors." Mrs. Peterson, an elderly neighbor, exclaimed, clasping her mother's hands, who was beaming like the sun, nodding proudly, as if this triumph was her personal achievement. Somewhere among the guests, Aunt Flavia was lost, the only one who, noticing me, came up and hugged me warmly, tightly, for real. "Bianca, honey, it's so nice to see you. How was your graduation?" "I'm sorry we couldn't make it." "Everything was fine," I replied, barely keeping my voice steady. "Thank God that at least someone remembered." Underscore. She frowned and looked around the room full of eulogies and pink balloons with Emily's name on them. "Wait," she said, turning to her mother, "what about Bianca? Aren't we celebrating both our daughters' graduation today?" Mom hesitated for a moment, as if trying to remember a prepared remark, straightened her shoulders. Her face broke into a strained smile. Of course, we're proud of both our girls," she said hurriedly. "Bianca just arrived, we didn't have time to post her name on." She hesitated, looking at the banner that read "Congratulations, Emily," on the set. I felt something jump in me, but I didn't say anything, because I knew that any objection would be perceived as excessive sensitivity. At that moment, Dad, who finally got up from the table, tapped the glass with a spoon, and the noise in the room subsided. "I want to propose a toast to our incredible daughters," he said, and my heart almost stopped. "Really?" "To Emily," he continued, not looking at me, "who graduated with honors from a prestigious business program. Mom and I couldn't be more proud. Emily, your determination and intelligence are something special, and as a token of appreciation, we want to give you this gift. He took out a box wrapped in a shiny wrapper with gold ribbons from under the table. Oh my God, thank you! Emily exclaimed, clutching the box to her chest. It's amazing, I promise, I will succeed, I will become rich. The applause rolled through the room, and I clapped too, involuntarily wondering what they would say about me. And Bianca, Dad said, turning to me with an expression that was both duty and vague concern. He reached under the table again and pulled out a rectangular package wrapped modestly in plain paper. Congratulations on completing your software training, computers. I picked up the bag, unwrapping it with a feeling that was hard to define, a mixture of surprise, apprehension, and restrained expectation. It was a book, How to Become a Millionaire, a step-by-step guide. We thought it would help you on your way, Mom said proudly. She has excellent reviews on the internet. Emily snorted, but immediately covered it up with a cough when she noticed Aunt Flavia's disapproving look. I'm sure Bianca will get rich someday, too, she added, patting my hand, and maybe when I launch my business, I can give you some advice. I stared at the book, feeling a strange mixture of resentment and almost hysterical amusement. If only they knew. Thank you, I said softly. I appreciate that. The dinner continued, looking more and more like a business conference, where the subject of discussion was Emily's business plans, her ideas, her prospects, her acquaintances, her. I excused myself, saying I was tired after the trip, and went up the creaking stairs to my old room. My room, like a museum of my teenage years, remained almost untouched. Posters with images of technology pioneers on the walls, neatly lined bookshelves with programming manuals, science fiction novels that I read by nightlight, and a desktop where I spent countless hours learning to write code while Emily had fun. Downstairs. I sat on the bed, turning over the book How to Become a Millionaire in my hands, and I couldn't help but smile. The irony was almost too perfect. My phone vibrated, interrupting the flow of ironic thoughts about the book that was lying on my lap, and I, still with slightly raised eyebrows, looked at the screen. A message from the real estate agent I contacted a few weeks before the release confirmed. I found the perfect apartment, meets all your requirements, is available to be shown tomorrow at 10 a.m. I couldn't help but smile, imagining the expressions on my parents' faces if it ever occurred to them that their daughter was going to buy her own apartment, not rent a dorm room, not share a place with unfamiliar neighbors, but buy it completely, without a mortgage, without credit counseling, without the blessings of elders, just buy it because it can. A light knock on the door made me lift my head, bringing me back from the world of imaginary reactions to reality, where it still smelled of guest perfumes and homemade cakes. May I? I heard Aunt Flavia's familiar voice, and her head appeared in the doorway. I just wanted to check on you. Down there. Well, let's say it's quite noisy. I shrugged, trying to look nonchalant. I'm used to it, I replied calmly, muffling in my voice what had actually become a painful habit for a long time. She came in and sat next to me on the edge of the bed, putting her hand on my shoulder. You know, you shouldn't feel that way. You graduated from the Institute of Technology, for God's sake. It's unbelievable, Bianca. I nodded, allowing myself to feel a slight warmth from the confession for the first time that day. Thank you, Aunt Flavia. Do you have any job prospects? What is it? She asked, looking at my face with interest. Actually, yes, I replied, a little more gently. I signed a contract with Technologies last month. I start in 2 weeks. Her eyes widened. Technologies? It's a huge company. Bianca, this is amazing. I smiled, feeling a rare sense of pride blossom in me, which I usually hid like a jewel in a box. The salary is also good, I added. I'll be fine. Even better than just fine. Do your parents know? I shook my head. They didn't ask. Aunt Flavia sighed, glancing towards the closed door. I've never understood why they're so fixated on Emily. You're both exceptional, each in her own way. After she left, I opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, just to make sure that it was still real, that these numbers, with 6 zeros, really belonged to me. $2 million. The amount that seemed impossible to my family is more than they have saved up in their entire lives, more than they gave Emily to start her business. The thought of revealing this caused a strange feeling, like nervousness before jumping from a height, fear, adrenaline, and excitement in equal parts. Will they finally see me? Not as an addition to Emily, not as a shadow, but as an independent, successful, mature person. I closed my laptop, stared at the ceiling, imagining these scenarios, that I could be silent, I could be invisible, Bianca, who was just always there, or I could show them what their forgotten daughter had really achieved. The next morning, I woke up early, packed my suitcase, and made a decision at night, a decision that takes a long time to mature, but comes suddenly. It's time to stop hiding. Not for recognition, not for applause, but for myself. I took the book How to Become a Millionaire, opened my laptop, went into the banking application, took a screenshot of the balance and printed it out. Then, carefully putting the sheet in the book, I went downstairs, where the fuss was already boiling. The family was sitting at breakfast. Mom was slicing fruit, Dad was holding a newspaper in his hands. Emily, beaming, talked about her plans to open a marketing agency for small businesses. Only renting office space is important, she said. You need something impressive to show your clients. Maybe something in the city center. Morning, I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Oh, morning, Bianca, Mom replied without even looking at her. There's toast if you want. I sat down at the table. Actually, I wanted to let you know that I'm leaving today. This instantly caught their attention. Dad put down the newspaper, raising an eyebrow. But you just arrived. I need to take care of something. I found an apartment in Cambridge. Mom frowned. But you just finished. How are you going to afford an apartment? I already have a job, I explained calmly. I signed a contract with Technologies before graduation. Is it a software company? My father asked, frowning. Well, good for you, but still. You're going to need roommates. Apartments in Cambridge are expensive. Emily nodded understandingly. You're going to live with 5 other programmers in some tiny loft, right? That's what happens at the beginning. I sipped my coffee, trying to hide my smile, knowing, almost defiant, ready to break out at the most unexpected moment. Actually, I said, putting my spoon on the saucer and leaning back in my chair, I'm going to live alone. This is a 1-bedroom apartment with a separate office and good internet, near the center, in a new house with security and a park across the street. Mom frowned, as if these words were too bold, almost defiant. Bianca, be realistic, she began in a tone that sounded reproachful, as if I had allowed myself too much. They don't pay much in the initial positions, especially in Cambridge. It's an expensive city. And, as if picking up a part in a long, practice duet, Emily added, you have to save for unforeseen expenses. This is the basis of any reasonable planning. Believe me, I studied at a business program. I calmly sat back down, carefully wrapped my hands around a cup of already cooling coffee and said, trying to keep my voice light, speaking of business. I wanted to thank you for the gift. I picked up the How to Become a Millionaire book, carefully placed it in the center of the table, and added, I think you should take a look inside. There's something there that might interest you. Dad, looking a little surprised, reached for the book, opened it, and as soon as the pages parted, a printout gently slipped out of them, a clear, contrasting screenshot of a bank account on which numbers were written in black and white, unable to go unnoticed. The paper fell smoothly onto the table, and for a second there was such silence, as if the air had thickened. Mom leaned forward to look, Emily craned her neck, and something primal was reflected on the faces of all 3 of them: surprise, confusion, anxious tension. Their eyes darted from the printout to my face and back again, as if they were trying to match what they saw with their usual image, but could not find a match. What is it? Dad finally asked, his voice suddenly soft, almost unrecognizable. My bank account, I replied simply, without making any unnecessary gestures. $2 million. Emily practically screamed, her voice rising, breaking the silence like glass hitting asphalt. Is this a joke? It's not a joke, I said, taking another sip of coffee, trying to sound calmer than I really felt. Do you remember when I talked about the app that Alex and I were developing? Then you didn't want to listen. We sold it to a technology company last year. Mom's hand involuntarily rose to her throat, as if it became difficult for her to breathe. Did you earn $2 million on some kind of application? After paying taxes? Yes, I nodded. We made a deal about a year ago. Dad shook his head slowly, still staring at the printout, as if trying to find a trick in it. Have you had this money for a whole year? And you didn't tell us anything? I met his gaze, without a trace of reproach, but with that heavy directness I've learned to defend myself with. If you were even a little bit interested in my life, you would know that. Emily's face changed. There was no shock in it anymore. She became calculating, collected, the one that I had seen since childhood in those moments when she tried to turn any situation to her advantage. This is amazing, Bianca, she said with sudden warmth. We should celebrate your success too. I always knew you were smart, it's worth noting. Mom reached across the table, gently touching my palm. Bianca, honey, we're so proud of you. These words sounded strange, alien, as if they hadn't come out of her mouth, but had been memorized, like a line from a script written by someone else. We'll take you to the station, she added, trying to get the situation back on track. No need, I replied, getting up from the table. The car is on its way. It should be here any minute. Goodbye, I said, opening the door. I'll contact you when I'm ready. And she left without looking back, without stopping for a second. When the car started moving and I looked out the window, I saw them standing on the threshold, confused, frozen, their faces like mirrors of unfulfilled expectations, a mixture of bewilderment, confusion and calculation, the same thing that was hidden behind any sudden manifestation of warmth. My phone started vibrating as soon as I left the house, and it continued until I turned it off. The messages poured in one after another, calls, notifications, dozens of attempts to establish contact. We need to talk. Please call us back. We are so proud of you. You're not alone. The family is always there. But it all sounded hollow, empty. The train ride to Cambridge was surprisingly quiet, almost peaceful, not clouded by thoughts of the past, not stained with doubts, just a fresh, clear horizon of possibilities before my eyes. I had money. I had a career that was just beginning. And, for the first time in a long time, I had freedom, not from someone, not for someone, but just by myself. I met with the agent at the hotel and went to see the apartment. It turned out to be perfect, bright, spacious, with tall windows overlooking a green square, and fast internet, of course, the most important detail. We signed the papers on the same day. Congratulations, Miss Wells, the realtor said, handing me the keys. She's yours now. I squeezed the key in my hand, feeling its weight, not only metallic, but also symbolic. That evening, after settling into my hotel room, I finally turned on my phone. 27 missed calls and dozens of messages, all with variations on the same theme. We need to talk. We're proud of you. The family should be together. I turned off my phone and, putting it on the bedside table next to a cup of unfinished green tea, went to the window, behind which the city, as if it had not known sleep, twinkled with thousands of lights in the night, as if each light in these countless windows symbolized someone's life, aspirations, victories and falls. Tomorrow, I told myself, looking at the reflection in the glass, when my face was lost in the glare of the streetlights, tomorrow will be the first day of my new life, and this time I control myself where and how my path will go. It took a week before I finally answered one of my mother's many calls, not because I had nothing to say, but because I didn't feel ready to return to the role of explaining myself, making excuses, and always being the second daughter. I was busy, and really busy. Arranging a new apartment took a lot of time, delivering furniture, connecting the internet, arranging equipment, and, of course, preparing to start working at Technologies, where I had to take the position of a junior developer. But to be honest, most of that time I just enjoyed the silence, the peace, that rare, almost forgotten feeling when you don't have to explain anything to anyone and you don't have to look at yourself with so many expectations that you want to disappear. Bianca, thank God, Mom sighed when I finally picked up the phone. We were so worried. It's okay, I replied calmly. I was just busy moving. We need to talk, she continued, and her voice took on that businesslike, fussily practical tone that I remembered from childhood. I know your father too well, and I'd like to discuss something important with you. Could you come home for the weekend? I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. I can't. It's my first day at work on Monday, and I haven't even unpacked all the boxes yet. Then maybe my dad and I could visit you. What is it? She asked with an unexpected eagerness that immediately alerted. Not this weekend, I said, firmly but calmly. What did you want to discuss? After a short pause, she exhaled, and I already knew what I was going to hear next. It's about Emily's business loan. We thought about it. Well, since you have one now, an unexpected income, maybe you would consider helping with the payments? After all, the family must support the family. That's the real reason for all these alarm calls and messages. Not caring about me. Not interested in my life. And the money. The opportunity to use me as a resource. No, I said. Simple and clear. There was a silence in which I could almost hear the scripts crashing in her head. No. What is it? She asked, as if the word was foreign to her. I won't give you the money to pay off Emily's loan, I repeated. It's not my responsibility. But we're a family, her voice began to rise, both indignation and resentment evident in it. After all we've done for you. What is it? I asked quietly, without raising my voice. I graduated from college on a scholarship. She covered all her personal expenses from her summer earnings. I created the app One earned money from without your support. Where exactly is your merit in all this? Silence again. And only then, I can't believe how selfish you've become. I'm not being selfish, Mom, I replied. I'm just setting boundaries. And to be honest, I need some time away from you right now. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk again. Bianca, wait. I ended the call. Over the next few days, the messages continued to arrive like waves on the shore, relentlessly, persistently. Dad decided to change tactics and started with compliments. He congratulated me on my entrepreneurial spirit, offered to discuss business prospects, as he called it. Emily, in turn, played on feelings of guilt. She recalled childhood games, episodes that I either didn't remember or knew were heavily embellished, trying to pull on the very cord of sisterhood that she had been severing for years. I didn't answer. As a result, I blocked their numbers. I needed the space. A space to focus on. Space to breathe. My first day at Technologies was exciting, in the best sense of the word. The office turned out to be the way I imagined it, spacious, bright, with common areas where you could relax, with a kitchen full of fresh fruits and coffee beans, but most importantly, an atmosphere where ideas were appreciated. My team greeted me warmly, without condescension or arrogance, with sincere interest. The manager, a young woman with a sharp mind and a gentle tone, said during our first personal meeting, "The application that you have developed is brilliant. That's the reason we hired you. We expect a lot." And at that moment, sitting in the meeting room, I felt something I hadn't known before. I wasn't being compared, I wasn't being ignored, they weren't trying to make me an addition to someone more noticeable, I was just appreciated. For my work. For my mind. For my essence. I quickly became friends with my colleagues. Our Friday nights have become a tradition. We would gather at my house, order pizza, laugh, play video games, or discuss another software bug that was bothering us. They accepted me without conditions. Not for success, not for money, not for my last name. Just for who I am. After 4 months of my new, independent and quiet life, a life in which I was finally no longer just a shadow of a brighter sister, Aunt Flavia called me. Her voice, always full of practical kindness, sounded without preface, immediately, from the threshold, as if the words accumulated during the time of silence were waiting only for opportunities to break out. "Your parents tell everyone," she said with slight irritation, "that you're rich now, but you refuse to help the family. I thought you should know." I exhaled silently, closing my eyes slightly, because deep down I expected something like this. Not because they are evil, but because they have never been able to see beyond their narrow, always revolving around Emily, reality. "Yes," I replied with tired sadness. I somehow suspected that they might do something like this. "Emily's business doesn't seem to be going well," her aunt continued, more gently. "It turns out that small companies aren't willing to pay a lot of money for marketing services when they can learn how to do a lot themselves through social media and online courses." "That's unfortunate," I said without malice. "But thanks for telling me anyway." "Don't worry," she said with warmth in her voice. "I've made it clear that you've set clear boundaries. Most of us remember how you've been treated all these years. No one blames you for keeping your distance." "Thank you, Aunt Flavia. It was really important for me to hear that." Her voice became clearer, as if the conversation had turned in a different direction. "Now tell me about your new job. Is everything there as you hoped?" We talked for almost an hour. About my work at Technologies, about the project that my team and I have just completed, about my cozy, light-filled apartment, about these cozy Friday evenings with colleagues, about friends with whom you can be yourself. During all this time, she never mentioned money, did not ask a single uncomfortable question, did not ask for anything. And when we hung up, I felt a lightness, an almost physical feeling that someone really just wanted to hear how I was doing, and that was it. 9 months have passed since that morning's conversation at the kitchen table, when I revealed the truth about my life to my family, and now, the phone rang again. This time it was my mom. I answered immediately, without hesitation, not out of naive hope that everything had changed, but out of mature curiosity. What if, at least a little? "Bianca," she said, and her voice was muffled, as if he was making his way through something heavy. "How are you?" "I'm fine, Mom," I replied calmly. "And you?" "Emily's business closed last week," she said with a sigh. "Now she's looking for a permanent job. Your father and I are still coping with the loan payments, but it's difficult." There was a pause, during which I could almost feel her gathering her thoughts. "I'm not calling to ask for money. I was just thinking about how we treated you." I was silent. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to hear everything. "I don't think I realized at the time how much we favored Emily," she continued, slowly, as if every word needed to be dragged out of the depths. "Until you put that screenshot of the bank account on the table. It was a shock. We realized how much you've achieved, and we didn't even notice." "Mom, you didn't have to earn $2 million to be worthy of attention," I said softly. "I know," she replied, and there was bitterness in her voice. "I'm sorry. It was unexpected. It was unusual. It wasn't enough to erase the years in which I felt superfluous, but it was something." "Thanks for saying that," I whispered. Maybe we could come over sometime to see where you live now. No pressure, no talking about money, just to see you." "I've been thinking. Maybe in a few months," I replied, honestly. "I'm still setting up my life." "We'll wait until you're ready," she said. And then, for the first time, "Bianca, I'm really proud of what you've achieved." After the conversation, I went out onto the balcony, where a light breeze fluttered the curtain, and the sun slowly sank below the Cambridge horizon, flooding the roofs and trees with golden light, and in this silence, in this peace, I suddenly realized I'm not ready for a full reconciliation yet, not because the resentment has not gone away, but because I need strength. We need confidence that we are bound not by guilt, not by duty, but by respect. But I saw an opportunity, that thin path along which, perhaps, one day we will go towards each other. My phone rang. A message from Zoya, my colleague, a team dinner at 7. Are you with us? I smiled and replied, definitely. When I went out to join my friends, these new people who knew and appreciated me, Bianca, not Emily's sister, not a girl with an unusual hobby, but an engineer, developer, hostess of a cozy house and an intelligent companion, I felt grateful. Thanks for the path that brought me here. I no longer needed my parents' approval. I was no longer the forgotten twin. I was myself, and that was enough. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.